Hi everyone and welcome back. So in this part of our video series we are going to talk about error handling. Error handling is important in any application and basically when an error happens in our application we want two things. We want the error to be visible in the log files. So we make sure that it is logged. And we make sure that what we log don't return to the customer because we don't need the customer that called our application or the client that called our application uh, get some stack trace from a database exception. We want something very elegant, an error message that is elegant returned to the customer. So these are important things, and for that matter, there are quite several ways of doing this. In the world of programming, there is no one way of doing things, and there is no best way of doing things. Uh, that said, Spring Boot provides a mechanism for handling errors without actually going and putting try catch block all over the place. And it is called the global exception handler. It's actually called a controller, but it's an advanced controller. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to set it up. It's very simple. Um, Before I do that, I'm going to come back to my requests over here. For example, to this get request. If I have an employee, for example, that doesn't exist in the database, like number 8, and I send this, right now I'm getting I'm getting no response basically. Okay, if we look at the preview, it's empty. And I'm wondering what happened. I'm not getting a reasonable error message. Or if I come to this post and I change, for example, this number to a string, okay, and I pass it, um, oh well, this conversion got done automatically, but actually um, let me let me change this to this age, for example, to like this 40. Okay, yeah, we got this general error message. It says this error happened, and we got a 400 bad request. So, but we don't exactly know what went wrong. We could be we know what we did now, but in a real world application, it would be hard to figure it out because if you go over here to the terminal or to the run console, in the log file you see what happened. Yeah, not a it says 40, not a valid uh, integer value. But the customer or the client at the other end didn't receive an error message that says age is not formatted properly. So we need to send back the information to the customer. The second thing I wanted to show you about this is that we are going to improve these namings and make them more meaningful to us. Excuse me. So, for example, over here, this this is a request that for creating an employee, right? So we say create employee. This is a meaningful name. And if you come to this get, we can say get employee by ID. And so if you come over here, you will see that actually the method is also in green next to it. So this is a get. Create employee should be a post. I'm not sure why it says a get over here. This is interesting. And but maybe when I save it, things change. It didn't. Let me change it. Yeah, now it says interesting. Okay, now it says post. And this was what? This was a put. We know it was a put, but we want to update employee over here. And over here, we want to remove employee. Okay. So now the names are more meaningful to us, and we looking at this, we know what's going on. There are we can do fancy stuff with Postman. We can create um, workspaces. We can create environments. For each environment, we can have different URLs, and we have options actually to pass in variables over here in Postman, and for example, parameterize this. Uh, but some of these variables. But right now, we don't want to get into fancy stuff with Postman because we don't want to be distracted. We want to focus on this enterprise application that we want to build. There are comprehensive Postman tutorials all over the network if you want to search for them. But the purpose of this video series is not teaching Postman or JSON, or it is basically building an enterprise application. And error handling is a big part of it. So how does Spring Boot handles errors? We have what Spring Boot offers us is a global exception handler. To utilize that, we need to create an error object that contains the information about the error. Now we can put anything we want in that object. So where do we create this object? Since we are going to create this object, we are going to create a custom exception, and we are going to create this custom controller exception. How about we put all of them in the exception package? That way, all the logic for the exception handling goes into a package. And let's call this error info. How about that? So it's asking us if we want to add this to the Git. That way we can commit it. We say, sure, let's add it. And what should be our error info? We should provide an HTTP status code, right? And that is usually an int. So it is a status or a status code. We need to provide a message. A message is a string. Okay. And we want to, for example, tell them when this error happened. We want that information as well. So how about passing a timestamp? And since that's a long number, we use long for it, long, and that would be a timestamp. All right. So having this, we need getters and setters for this, right? This is a POJO. So how about we use um, uh, we use the getter method from Lambok to create this because we need to return this information. And for the setting of it, we use the constructor. How do we do that? We can do Lambok as well. So what does Lambok do? Quickly, I tell you, it provides, when I do this annotation, it provides getter for all these methods at compile time and injects them into the class. And I can do the same thing for a get for a constructor, but I want to actually I prefer to do this manually. So in the constructor we use a status and message only, and we set the timestamps ourselves. So what is going to be timestamp? Timestamp is going to be current time. The way to specify that, we say system.current time in millis. Wonderful. So this takes care of our error object that we are going to return. Now we need a custom error. What do we need this custom error to be? We have, what if, as I explained in this scenario, what if we look for an employee and that employee, the ID doesn't exist, nothing comes back, but we need an error message that says this employee doesn't exist. So how do we say that? We create a class and call it employee not found exception. All right. And I would like to say add. I could also check mark this so that from now on Git automatically adds this um, for a staging and committing to the repository. But this is what how Git keeps track of checks and balances. Uh, but I hesitate to say don't ask again because I would like to have full control over this. I might want to create a class and don't want it to be committed. Of course, I can go and update git ignore to ignore it in that case. But right for the time being, I like to add this manually. So this exception, this custom exception, we will be extending the runtime exception. Why the runtime exception? Because we want it to be unchecked. We don't have to add a catch block for it. And in terms of exceptions and custom exceptions, also I encourage you to find other resources for that if this is something that is new to you. Right now I'm creating a custom exception for when the employee cannot be found by the ID. So over here I'm going to basically have a method called public and just an one arc constructor. How about that? One arc method, and say, how do I do this? I say it's a constructor, yeah, and it has only one message in it. Okay, because you see, from when we can override all of these messages from runtime exception. All right, but this is the one that we are most interested in, this constructor. And because we want to send the correct message to the client when the employee is not there. We want to say employee not found exception, or the employee doesn't exist in plain language. So, but in real world examples, there are more type of constructions that we may want to engage in this scenario. So far we have the error info, we have the custom exception. Now we're going to go and create the global exception handler. So what do we name this? It could be anything. Let's say global exception handler or employee exception handler. How about that? Employee exception handler. And let's add that. This is important part. We have to have a REST controller, but REST controller exception advice actually. REST controller advice. So this is not a normal REST controller, it's an advice REST controller. This kicks in when an error happens. And Spring Boot promises us that takes care of this. It's part of auto configuration feature that comes with using Spring Boot. It's like um, the benefits that come in with something, like if you go to live in live for a while in a hotel, they tell you, okay, if you stay here for more than a week, we are going to let you use the pool for free, and the breakfast is for free and everything. And now we bring that example here with the Spring Boot. It says, okay, if you use my global exception handler, then it will kick in for free whenever an exception is happening. Just annotate it with this REST controller advice. So over here, we have different methods for different type of exceptions. For our particular exception, we say public, and so we say handle employee not found exception. And we need to pass in the employee not found exception, and we call it exp. Something important to remember over here. Uh, well, what does this return? I have to add that too. This returns an error info. How about that? For the time being, I would think. For this to be able to be part of the auto configuration handling of um, Spring Boot, we need to annotate it with exception handler. And now everything is nice and dandy. Over here, this exception is generated. So let's create an error info object. All right. So we call that error, new error info, and then we are going to add this exception as the message and the status as a status code. So how does that work? We say HTTP, hopefully it comes up a status code, yeah, dot. The resource is not found. So this is when employee is not there. So how do we specify that? We say that, okay, I'm looking for that particular way of saying this, not found here, not found value. Okay, so this is going to come back as 404, means the resource was not found. And then this part, the message would be exp.get message. Okay, cool. And then we return this error. All right, so if you want to get rid of this complaint, kind of like SonarQube way of complaining, we could just return this part. But I especially leave it this way because it helps with debugging later on. And I'm going to have a session on debugging, which I'm kind of like doubtful about, because that's also something that's very common in the world of programming. And we don't want to get distracted by nitty-gritty things, but I can do a quick demo of this debugging as well. Let's see how fast we can move on. So we have this exception handler for employee not found exception, but what if there is something else? What if the database is down? What if some other exception might happen? So we always need to have another exception handler for any other kind of exception, and that would be this type of exception. Exception in general, the root exception. And over here we say handle any other exception. Okay, handle any other exception. And over here, what would the status code would be in this scenario? We would like to return a 500 error message. That would be internal server error exception. So let's go and find that. Or I can just type in, and this comes up, internal server error. Okay. But we have to be cognizant about this, because this error message, for example, if there is database exception, return the details about the database exception. First of all, it is not pretty. Imagine the client receives an error message that says primary key constraint was violated, and he scratches his head and wondering what a terrible thing he did. So we want to change this message down the road, but I'm just going to leave it for the time being and return the error. So this is not a perfect example, but anyhow, we are going to now go save this and go back to our service class. Now over here to service class, if you are looking for an employee by ID, and then it would have been nice if I say get employee by ID over here, but look what happens. If the employee doesn't exist, it returns null. That's why we are getting over here, we are getting that nothing is coming back here. So employee optional, okay. And sometimes, I'm not a dictionary, I forget things and I get reminded of, we are passing a supplier here, not a blunt error message. So now this should work. employee not found exception, and let's pass in our exception, employee with this ID does not exist, and then plus ID. So yeah, and this should be new. We finally got this right. Whew. Okay, so now everything looks good. Let's recompile this and run it. So it's been recompiled. I explained to you that there is a DevTools that when the code is changed and saved, it automatically restarts the server. I'm not very much in favor of it because it's slow. Sometimes I have to wait for this to kick in and redeploy. I prefer to do it manually. It's quicker. Now if I come over here, let's see, and I look for this employee number, instead of getting null, I should get a meaningful error message. Yes, it comes with a status code 404 employee with this ID does not exist, and it tells us exactly what's wrong and gives us a timestamp. Now we can format this timestamp and to present us with the day. Right now it's the time in millis, but we don't. That's not related actually very much to what we are trying to achieve here. But even though the status code is 404, over here we are getting 200. It says everything was green, nothing wrong happened. So we have to take care of that too, and that happens in exception handler. Over here, we are returning an error info. And as far as the Spring sees it, it's an object. As far as the the um, um, browser sees it, everything went fine, and so we are getting error message status code 200. Everything went fine. We have to tell Spring to return the correct error message. And how do we do that? As I explained before, we do that through response entity to have control over the status code that goes back. So let's change this to contain response entity. We actually do it this. Let's do it this way quickly. Response entity, and then we come over here. This response entity has a status of HTTP status, yeah, and then not found. Yes, very good. And then we're gonna pass in our object, which is error, in the body. So this should do it. And we're gonna do the same thing for this guy. And this one as well with a different status code. Okay, so yeah, let's do that. So we return the same status code here. Okay, remove the extra semicolon. Yeah. Now, if we redeploy this and we test it, we are supposed to get the correct error, the correct status code up over here too in the request, actual response that comes in. So yeah, now the response is correctly saying the resource was not found. So with any other thing, we should see that that the other exception should be thrown actually with any other exception. How can we mimic this? So if we come over here, for example, we should we should change this error message because imagine that I go over here with this create, and now if I change this to 40, we are probably are going to see, yeah, see, this is coming back from the server. It says JSON parser error, cannot deserialize value of integer 40, not a valid value, not a valid integer value. Very well, it's good. It makes sense to our developers. What about somebody that doesn't know what is a JSON parser error or things like that? This should be an elegant error. This error for us developers should appear in the logs, and actually, if I go over here into the I'm sorry, the run over here, I should see that error appear here. The reason I don't see it appear here is because I haven't logged it. So let's go ahead. First of all, log this error message. So how do we log it? We say, okay, the one way of, because I'm not using any logging framework over here. Let's utilize another feature of Spring that helps us with logging. So we can use log4j2 over here. With just doing this, Spring takes care of all the piping of a logger for us. And then it provides us with a logger. So log.error, and then we have this like exp, we can get the message, and we can also log the message over here, right? So if I restart the service, now we will see the log message in the logs. We go back over here and see we have a stack trace that tells us exactly what happened and where it happened. So this is important, and it helps us with finding the exact how to fix the exact error that happened. So let's go ahead and basically after this modification, we are going to pass in the correct error message to the customer, but we are going to log it in our log file. So how do we do this? We have a custom exception, we have a custom error message here. We can just do it this way. There are many ways of doing it. We can make it a static final message up here. We can make it a constant, but for the purpose of our doing, let's say something went wrong. Please try again later. Please try again later. Okay. Now, what happens is that the customer gets this in the message, but we get the stack trace in the log. So if I go ahead, instead of this message, you'll see something went wrong. Please try again later. And we have the stacked trace of the error in the log. So this is good and wonderful so far. What else did I wanted to cover as part of this? This was great. I'm glad we did this. I'm wondering what to do as part of next video, and I'm thinking just to go ahead and containerize this. Before I containerize this application, I should say that it's important to create unit test case for this and put them in the test folder. For any new functionality that we create, we should create unit test cases. Creating unit test cases is not something I cover here, and it's not the main focus of our application. But we can utilize JUnit to go ahead and use different methodologies, like first create the unit test and then create the functionality. We usually we mock remote classes. For example, we mock employee repository, we mock a remote layer that calls external services. And we basically, usually, what we do is that we go ahead and in our we test usually the service class that has or changes in it. Okay, so because the logic is usually in the service class. So when service classes, for example, over here, calling some other repository, usually, there are some validation going on here. We can put some validation here. Also, um, we don't need this comment. Let's clean our code. Okay, before that, for example, we could have some validation logic here. So that validation logic can be tested over here in the test layer. But we never invoke the remote layer. We mock it. And there basically we create a dummy repository, and we return the value that we want it to return. So that's great. It gives us a lot of control over testing without actually connecting to the database or calling remote services. And we used to do that back in the days, like 20 years ago, but that's obsolete and we don't do it anymore. Now with the packages like Mockito, we have more control over our test cases. We are not at the mercy of database connection or the other service being up and running for our test to pass, unit test to pass. Now integration testing is a different story, but we are focusing now on unit testing over here. So with this assumption that we already have created unit test cases and everything is nice and shiny, we go ahead and containerize this application in our next video. Thank you for being with me so far and being patient with resolving all these issues that we encounter during our programming. This is a video that is not edited, and these are the things that really us programmers encounter at real work when we are developing things. And this is one way of dealing with. There are many ways of doing the same thing in the world of programming. There is many way of handling errors as well. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.